Walk the Talk America presents Guns and Mental Health, a podcast for firearms owners, clinicians, and the curious public.
All right, we are live once again with the WTTA podcast. This is a little bit of a pop-up podcast because something was brought to our attention by our good friend Chris Jachimiec, which we'll get to in a second, Chris. But I'm joined by my co-host Kevin Berry. How you doing, Kevin?
Doing good.
Good. We're going to talk about something today, and I'm going to introduce Chris in a second. But it's something that is been weighing on my mind recently, and the reason why is when I see reports like this that come out, I think of there's one Walk the Talk America, right? And the way that we wanted to approach better mental health for gun owners and suicide prevention, if you will, for gun owners, right? Is to be broad about it, to kind of wrap everything under the gun. So here you have the firearm, and then underneath it you have, first responders, you have active duty military, combat vets, you have the guy, the weekend warrior that likes to just go out and train. We felt that it was easier to make a broad message and then have all the people that are attracted to the gun or behind the Second Amendment or the gun, they use the gun for their personal life or their professional life, fall into that category. But when it comes to veterans, and they do make a disproportionate amount of the suicides that we have daily, I think about all the organizations that are out there. I think about all the help that the VA tries to give or attempts to give. But when you talk about organizations that deal with mental health and suicide prevention or just help for veterans in general, there are thousands of them, right? Where I feel like Walk the Talk America is one. Some could say some of the other organizations in the firearms industry, there's a little overlap there, like with what NSSF does or maybe Hold My Guns does. But I guess my thing is why, and this is a bit, higher level question, especially for you, Chris, when we talk to you today about this, is why are we failing at this? Like with all the attention, why does it seem like the numbers go backwards or they go down a little bit and then they go back up? And it's just like we've been at this for years, kind of ignoring the general gun owner and focusing on the veteran with a gun or the active duty military first responder with a gun, ignoring gun owners as a whole. When you talk about 74 to 76 people a day taking their life with a firearm, and then let's say the number is 22. Why with all the attention are we failing? But without further ado, I want to introduce our guest, Chris Jachimiec. He's an Air Force veteran. But you served 20 years, right?
I did, yeah, just slightly over 20 years. And I was medically retired just as the pandemic hit in 2020, right after that, due to some of my own mental health concerns. And that was a broad paint stroke of an entire 20-year career. It was a lot of things that got built up. And that's a part of the story there.
Yeah, you're a suicide loss survivor. You lost your brother, right? You've been on this podcast a couple times. You are Walk the Talk adjacent. I mean, we've had you in our training videos, which I appreciate you. Your first appearance on this podcast was in November 23rd, 2020. I encourage everyone to go listen to that episode. It actually still really holds up. I was listening to it this morning just because I kind of wanted a refresher, and I was like, man, this you nailed it, right? But you also too have dedicated your life to this cause, like I have, like Kevin has. Like what we're doing. You are at all the conventions. I saw you at MCon recently. You really walk the talk when it comes to suicide prevention and better mental health. And, I just want to tip my cap to you because, like I said, when I see your face at one of these things, it's like, I know there's somebody else in there that gets it, so thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate the support that you and the organization have done for so many veterans and first responder organizations to help kind of shorten that proverbial kill chain, is to make things more comfortable, because many veterans and first responders themselves, like, we join because we believe in the Second Amendment, we believe in our right to bear arms, and that's what we're out there, those rights we're out there protecting. And for the majority of us, that's one of the first things you do when you enter the military, within the first several weeks of joining the military, whether you're a seasoned firearms expert or somebody that's handling a weapon for the first time. You get your indoctrination to firearms culture immediately upon joining the United States military.
Yeah, for sure. I'm always excited to ask any kind of service member or veteran why they're attracted to Walk Talk America, just because, like I said, we don't specialize in it, but there seems to be an attraction there, and it just warms my heart when someone's just like, "Hey, you don't make us feel like wounded ducks. Like, it's nice to go under the second." It just shows you how important the second is to people. But I want to dive into this report that you sent over the other day, which kind of basically caused Kevin and I to respond to you with, "Hey man, you got to come on the podcast. We got to talk about this." So what's going on here?
Yeah, so there's a recent RAND report that's entitled "Perceptions of Mental Health Confidentiality Policies and Practices in the United States Military," and it's a lot of things that we've kind of discussed for years as that goes into it. And so this report, the RAND organization is a large think tank that does a lot of research, and they do a lot of great research. And one of their arms is specifically on veterans and military. And so they surveyed about 60,000 active duty military members with a broad paint stroke of your enlisted, your officer corps, your commanding officers, and everything. And we seem to kind of be stuck in this holding pattern again, still based upon trust and confidentiality. So what this report actually found is perceptions of limited mental health treatment confidentiality affect service members' decisions regarding seeking treatment, and that perceived negative consequences of getting mental health care continue to be a pervasive barrier to care for military service members. And so the examples they cited are the following. More than half of the respondents agreed or strongly agreed that the following concerns might affect their decision to seek mental health treatment: impact on the ability to deploy or go downrange and do your job. 61% of respondents were concerned about that. The effect of security clearances, a total of 59.8%. Harm to their military professional career, 57.4%. And then entry into military training school, 56.3%. Now, the one that I really want to highlight here is, that's just a barrier to getting in the care. Once they're inside the care, which I believe there's some very well-intended and great therapists and professionals within it, but the report states that nearly 90% of the respondents surveyed indicated that they would limit what they would share with military and mental health care providers because of privacy concerns. And that is really damning and concerning, because overall the whole system is built upon trust. And so if you're going in there, you have to build this therapeutic relationship built upon trust. But the second and third order after effects is this lack of trust with privacy concerns. It almost upends the entire system. And that's where it can be very concerning, and stopping people from actually seeking care that they may need to help themselves within their own lives.
Yeah, it's something that we've been talking about for years, and it seems like every time one of these reports comes out, it's just a reminder of how far we haven't come. You know what I mean? In solving this issue. I see Ghost Tactical, obviously Ghost Marine, former Marine, good friend of the shows, WTTA adjacent, right? One of those supporters, but he just says, most believe that their careers will be over if they bring up TBI or anything that could change their mental capabilities. And like you said earlier, like these are the people that defend this country. These are the people that carry weapons, and they're afraid to show any sort of weakness. Kevin, you brought up a great point when we were talking before the show. Great question, right? Why don't you ask Chris that?
Yeah, it just seems like it's a hard situation to be in because obviously if someone's struggling with their mental health, a commanding officer should probably be aware of those struggles, but that also puts a lot of trust and faith into that commanding officer and trusting them that that won't get out or have any other thing. And then on the opposite side, we see the end of the spectrum of so much resources are being put into veterans after they're out of the military, but it doesn't. I haven't heard much about what mental health resources are being given to them while they're in the service to maybe make that after duty life maybe easier.
It's the efforts are there, and I think it's because a lot of it is, some of these programs that the DoD has created aren't quite too publicly known that are there. There's a 2020 report recommendation that came out. Is the DoD got after it? It's called the SPIREC report. It was a pretty big think tank that came together with a lot of professionals in there, and they highlighted some of these really good resources that are available internally. So like for the your special operations command, for your very branches of services, and even the Air Force themselves, is they created a lot of these programs to where specifically here in our own backyard of Nevada, there's one up at Creech Air Force Base called like your human performance teams, to where it takes all the aspects of health, both all your physical, mental, social, spiritual domains of health. There is, they got therapists in that were able to get higher security classifications to be able to get behind some of these things, to where like they can discuss some of the things that they were going on duty in some of these secure environments. So the efforts are there, along with some of our very rural military bases. You think of your North Dakotas, your Wyomings, your Montanas, that is putting together teams that would embed into some of these very remote locations that our service members are operating in. And they've tried that. They've made a lot of concerted effort on there. Funding just seems to dissipate for some of these programs that have not allowed it to kind of continue. And I got to experience that a little bit with working in some of the units that I was in. Is just like the care is there. Like, I'll give you an example. When I lost my brother initially, I sought out. There's a career field within the military is survival response. So they employ some battlefield psychologists and everything there. And that was one of the first persons that I sought out for care. So the resources are available. And I think this is where the teammates rely on one another. Maybe it's not the traditional, you're going to the clinic and everything like that. Is the effort's been made within that? And I can see where the question is coming in. It's like, even with those funded resources, those very specific getting after it, is why does this trust still continue? And I believe personally is you have to de-silo a lot of the actual care from readiness. Is finding that appropriate balance there of privacy that mixes with readiness and mixes with actual care that continues to be a complexity within our active duty military.
Yeah. So one thing that I've always been impressed with military folks, the ones that are really in it, right? Like your ghosts, you guys are very attuned to mental health. And I feel like you guys would always probably talk to each other, especially when you're in the same unit, right? Or, you're stationed together, you're working together. It's just so weird that you guys could be so conscious of that and band together. And then just like 3 steps away, there could be somebody that's in this with you. And you're like, well, I can't tell that person this. I mean, is that how it feels? I mean, as someone who's experienced that, and Chris, you're the only person on this podcast right now, besides Ghost in the chat, that can actually walk the talk with this. Is it one of those things where you're constantly looking around and being like, who can I trust? Who can I trust?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of that is like it's earned over time. Is those, if you've gone down range and you've bled with them, or you're on duty with them and you build that rapport, like you can trust your buddies. But it's like the system behind it is, a lot of people join the military because they either want, some of the to serve their country, to do something new, to get out of a bad situation when they grew up with, wherever they're at. And a lot of us find this newfound purpose that's within there. And I think we're very protective of that because we don't want to lose that purpose, is that higher calling to be able to, serve something greater than ourselves, and any threat to being able to serve a purpose that's bigger than yourself like comes into existence. So you're very cautious on what you want to do because you don't want to take yourself out of the game because of something you may be dealing with. It's like you get in, you buy into that, the honorable code of serving this nation. And again, if anything detracts from that, it's like you may be reserved and resistant to it because it's fulfilling to serve out your enlistment and earn an honorable, discharge for that. The military award system, there's a lot of pride that comes into earning awards, recognition, military promotions, ascending the ladder of that. And any threat against that, you may not want to open up to that. And what Ghost says there too, it's a very, masculine environment. You don't want to be perceived as weak. You don't want to come off as there's weakness on the battlefield. There's weakness when everything's going to hit the fan and when you really need to turn it on. Like you want to be able to rely on that person and to your left and to your right, and not be able to say like that. But and a lot of the challenges may not be coming from the combat and duty environment. It may be self. It may be like when you take the uniform off and get home internally, the being able to provide for your family, being able to access the right resources, not where you're going next, is bringing some of the work stress home with you. Is that's where you see a lot of the cracks that come to it. And yeah, I mean, it can be very tough to open up.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, especially as someone who went through a really, really messy divorce and still had to go to work every day. You know what I mean? Sometimes it could be this your relationship, say, with your father or something is breaking down in your private life, right? It has nothing to do with the actual service itself or what you're doing. That might be your escape, where you can take your mind off things. But it just seems like, oh man, it's just, I just don't know what the answer is for this. And obviously we're not going to solve this problem on this podcast. And that's what we keep working at, but it just seems like we're just going backwards with this stuff. You know what I mean? Like this report, when you sent this over, I read it and I just, in my head, I thought, do we have to do another report on this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so how many more reports do we need to show that all the stuff that we say is real? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a delicate balance. Is where do we find the success stories in that? Like the people that actually did go in and their careers weren't impacted to the level, like to build trust into the system. And I think that's why I like what you guys do, is because you talk to folks out there, you make it, therapy all in all. Like firearm owners want trust. If I'm in a crisis and I need to turn, I want somebody to handle my firearms temporarily while I see some care. Well, I want to have inherent trust within that person that, my rights aren't going to be infringed upon. Like I can do this in a safe environment. I'm going to, be able to handle these firearms again when I'm done seeking treatment. And it comes down to that. And I think we're seeing it in some environments. That's why these peer-based programs work a lot, because you've got folks that have been built up by the experiences. So when I go out and I interact with some other veterans groups, it's the ones that I have enjoyable experiences with that are there, that I can be like, hey, this guy or this gal gets me because they've been through the same stuff that I've been through. So I can break down that barrier of trust a little bit better. We've got around 600,000 licensed clinicians in this country. And you would think we could solve it a little bit with that many people employed in a mental health healthcare setting. And I don't have the numbers on peer support specialists. That's an emerging, avenue of support there. But I'd be safe to say that, like, I think what we get wrong sometimes too is it goes beyond mental health. It's like what in our day-to-day life is being able to provide that hope, meaning, and purpose that's out there. It can't just be solved by the mental health community. It's going to take the entire community to be able to get after this wicked problem that we have there.
Do you feel like this, it's never a lost cause for the VA, right? But like, do you feel that there's all the wrong messengers involved in this at this point? Like when you look back at it?
I wouldn't say all the wrong messengers. I think we need more in the right attitude. I think we have to get through this broken veteran stereotype. I think we need to share more of the success stories as well too, especially when it comes to like folks like us who've sought care. Like, hey, I temporarily stored my firearms. This was okay. I got them back. I did this. My life is better. Post-traumatic stress is not a death sentence. That D at the end seems like it's a death sentence to people, to where it's like, I'm defined by this disorder, when that's anything but the truth. Is, there's more successful veterans out there than there are broken veterans. There's more successful first responders out there, firearms owners, than there are those who have kind of slipped through the cracks and been in the system. So we need to celebrate our successes a little bit more. And as far as the VA goes, is like, the effort and energy are there. And I know you've worked on partnerships and relationships with them. Like, they've extended the olive branch and they've built on partnerships for years. Like, to see them assign and have a presence at a place like SHOT Show, and to continue to build relationships with NSSF and other organizations that are there, like, that's what we need. And this is an open call to the veteran services organizations out there. Like, 75% of our brothers and sisters are dying by their own hands through the use of firearms. Yet VSOs are very inclined to talk about firearms storage when it comes to suicide prevention among veterans. And like, this is where I appreciate Walk the Talk, because you can have that open conversation. And so, like, how do we get more veterans organizations and first responder organizations to recognize, like, hey, like, let's have an open, constructive dialogue about this, a very respectful dialogue about responsible firearms ownership. And I've said it in a post before. It's like, we learn this when we go into the military. You don't handle it without going through a weapons safety course first. So understanding this is like, hey, fellow veterans, like, like, when you get that training should follow you. That security of your firearms, that respect for that as a tool, both for your protection, your rights, and everything, that should follow you when you get your DD 214 and depart the service.
Yeah, coming off of the conference that I was just at in Seattle, which was a lot of researchers. Have you ever been to that conference, Chris, or did you ever go to that?
I have not been to that one yet. I'm aware, like we discussed offline, like, we have a bunch of mutual people that we know that were there, and
Okay.
I think there's a lot of some good coming out of it, and I really like the perspective that you gave on it as well too.
I appreciate that. Yeah. See, like, walking around that, and Ghost in the chat made a comment. It's like, I'm not smart enough to get that done. Right. And that's coming off of what he said. I think most vets would be more comfortable talking with someone who served, maybe start trying to get more vets in the treatment and physician world, which I completely agree with you, Ghost. I think maybe if there's a pathway to do that as a career when you're done serving, and it was more publicized, right, where that could be the answer. And I feel like we do that in some other places. I know Kevin, Jake's cousin, sorry, the name is escaping me. Brandon, yes, Brandon, former guest of the show. I mean, he was a cop that they created a position where they made it easy for him to transition into that. And, that even took time, right? If you listen to that podcast, he talks about, hey, I walked around for a long time where they were like, oh, there's the cop who became a cop, like, against us. But then he slowly started building the trust that, hey, that's the guy you go talk to if you're not feeling so well. So maybe there needs to be an easier transition path. We talk about getting veterans careers once their service is done. Maybe that's one that needs to be magnified a little bit more. Hey, like, you understand what we all go through because you've lived it. What a better job for you to transition to. Do you like helping your brothers and sisters. You know what I mean? Like that would speak to me if someone made that available to me and gave me a pathway to say, you know, this is how you do it, and it's not as hard as you think to be able to you know, hold that position. But you know, walking around the conference, yeah, I kept looking at all these people doing research, and really great people, and some people I think really genuinely wanted to help people, but you know, some of them would default to just that, hey, like, you got to get away from this gun, this is a bad thing, you know, get away from it, get it out of there. And it's like talking to my friend who's going through a really bad breakup with his girlfriend. You know, sometimes you got to listen to your friend talk, and they may be venting about that person, but you know that the answer for them is not, dude, leave her, or yeah, man, drop her. It's like that person is venting to you because they want you to try to make sense for them. Sometimes you got to go the opposite way, man. You got to like try to play devil's advocate and be like, well, your behavior, or like, you know, think about it. Well, she does this for you, she does that for you. Because I'm like, you know, a lot of people just don't want to get in the weeds of that conversation, so they just say, get away from it. We don't want to get into the whole like, get away from the gun. We want to keep the gun and still be able to fix this neighborhood up here. You know what I mean? And here. And I just feel like so many people, that because they're not part of that, they always default to that. Well, let's just get the guns out. And then it's just like, well, wait a second, when can I get them back? What if I decide I'm good in 2 days? Like, why do we have to have a time limit on this thing? I think we have to have way more nuance when we discuss this stuff.
Oh, I agree. Like it's so complex and detailed, and every situation is different. And like you gave the best analogy there is like, you know, the relationship stress. It's like, okay, like man, like highlight the good things about it, like what's going on. And that's where it takes the trust again. Like that's a conversation you have with a trusted individual, is like to reframe your mind instead of being this, you know, getting in this catastrophizing. It's like having this legit with somebody you trust to help work through the situation. And I think that it does take a lot of that. It's like, hey, let's talk through this as your buddy. Let's talk through this. Let's get this. I know you. I know your behaviors. I know your nuances. Like let's work through this together. And that comes in very well to the firearms discussion. It's like, you know, when I went through my own thing is when I had to seek some help after losing my brother. I did give a firearm to somebody that I really trusted, and that's the only one I wanted to have it while I went through that. And you know what? I got it when I was done through that. I got it back, no questions asked, no problems. And it's just like that kind of thing. It's like, you good? Yep, I'm good. Like. And that's what it takes. Is again, it all comes down to trust.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of want to, if you don't mind, going back there for a minute, because when I was listening to your podcast earlier, when I was having coffee this morning, kind of reading over things, you know, yours was actually a fairly positive story. And like you just said, sometimes I think we positive in terms of like, in the end, and you not being judged for what you were going through. Because I think at one point Jake had asked you in the podcast, like, hey, did you ever feel that you were being judged for the way that you know, things were going for you? And you were like, no. You know, so like, why don't you kind of revisit that situation? Like I said, I don't want to pick at scabs and things like that, but I feel like you've talked about it a lot. You know what I mean? It's already been out there, but like, you went through it. You're like, I have an issue, I have a problem, right? And then I think you, on the podcast, you actually said something like, I gave myself a harder time than most people gave me. I think it's because you said you didn't deploy over or something like that.
Yeah. So like, there were 2 points in my military career that were really difficult, to where I had to, you know, I leaned on others to be able to, you know, secure my firearms for a time. And it was the beginning of my career. So I had just deployed in the year 2000. We'll go in the way back machine, to where I went and supported Operation Southern Watch, the predecessor to the Iraq War. And during that deployment, it would be March of 2001. I'd lose my mother unexpectedly. And so that threw me into a tizzy when I came back. I'm a 20-year-old man that just lost his mom, and I was overseas while this happened. 2 months after that, I'd lose my grandfather unexpectedly. And so, grief was really tough. Is two very important people in your life. You had just went across to serve your country, and you got back. And at that time, I was protecting some very sensitive resources at Nellis Air Force Base on a daily basis. First thing I do is walk in an armory, make sure my weapon was safe, make sure my weapon was clear. And there was a lot of pressure in my career at the time, is trying and get promoted to get my next skill level for on the job, so I could obtain a promotion. And I didn't see care right away. And there was one day on post where I just told my partner, because the military would be kind of like your law enforcement officers as well too. You'd be paired up in a buddy system. I was like, hey, I'm not feeling right. You got to get this gun away from me. And so I knew it right then and there. And that person on post with me just called the post supervisors, said it like that, and got me there, and I got into care right away. And the regret.
But that part, the called the post supervisor. See, this is where, like, you've shared this with somebody, and then they said to you, I gotta call this person, a commanding officer or somebody higher up.
Right. Yeah. And so that was all the way. I mean, that just shows you the depth of the system all the way back in 2000, but 2001. And that's because it deals with manning and protecting your resources and everything there. But like, so that just show, like, this is the mentality we had all the way back, pre 9/11. But I had trust in that I could, and this was my own personal trust, because I trusted somebody in my leadership at the time. And it's because, like, when I lost my mom, like, this person really took care of me and getting me home to be able to provide that. So I had an inherent trust that I was going to be taken care of. I can't say the same for everybody else in the military, but I will tell you, it's there. If you have the right people in the right positions, the trust can absolutely be there. My regret came in is, like, I was taken out of the game when 9/11 happened. I wasn't able to deploy right away and do everything, but progressively as it went on, I found a different career field. I was able to maintain my weapons bearing and earn it back, be able to deploy again and do other missions to be able to provide service in the Air Force, once I worked through the grief of two major losses in my life. And so the possibility is there. And again, like I said, it comes down to trust. And it was the people that I trusted in those positions that they did the right thing and they took care of me.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because obviously, from 9/11, all the stuff that happened, there's going to be more opportunities for you to get back over there, or be part of your team. But at that same time, so, like, how long was the period? Were you able to make the call, or did you have to? You said you had to gain back the trust. So did you have to jump through a lot of hoops yourself, or?
It was a lot of going through treatment. I had to complete the treatment cycle. So generally that's like 10 sessions of treatment. So it can be up, you get one a month. That's 10 months. Most on average, it was like every other week as I was seeing somebody through it. And it all depends on what you're going through at that time. So it took a while. It took almost a year for me to kind of get back into the game to work through some things. And that would be eventually, like, I'd go to school, I'd learn the new job, I'd learn the new military profession. And at the end of that, I was able to do things. Did it have an impact on my career? Well, yeah. I mean, a slight. I stayed in the Air Force, but I didn't stay in the career field that I was signed up for. So there's a solution to problems like that. Is, like, you may not stay in the military career, and it ended up being probably one of the biggest blessings for the entirety of that. I got into good missions. The person who helped me out was a first sergeant. I'd get to pay that back forward, 10 years later, when I would fill that role that trusted person gave in. And I brought that energy of trust into that role to be able to care for people that were part of my command. So I learned a lot of good lessons, and I hope I was able to impart some of that leadership on some people to where they could trust. And I knew a lot of people did open up to me, because I would share this story with them, as, like, this is how I went about care, and they would share that confidently with me. So I built up, because of sharing my own personal story of what I went through, I was able to build up trust in other service members to be able to open up and get care that they needed.
Okay, and sorry for these questions, but obviously I've disclosed many times I know nothing about the military. So you have commanding officers, right?
Yeah.
And then you have some level above them. And I don't. Do you really jump over that commanding officer, or is usually all your communication, especially when you're in a time of crisis, come to the commanding officer first, and then the commanding officer has to make decisions on who comes into play after that?
It's a very large share. So your commanding officers, your first line of support, like they're in charge of that. And there are some reporting requirements that will go above the commanding officer. Like the Air Force, we would have it up to what we would call the group commander or the wing commander. And there are decisional levels based upon like the severity of what the issue is going on. So if it has a higher level impact, it depends on who's going to be informed. Where the higher level works out is able to navigate and access resources based upon the positional power that they have in there. So if there's something like, say, a commanding officer is struggling with getting their personnel access to resources, the next echelons above could be like, actually, let me open that up. Let me call my fellow subordinate over at this installation or within this and try to figure out how to do it best. So it's a very highly tiered system within each branch of the military that can move and shake, or it can be a barrier at the same time as well too.
Okay, because I guess that's what I'm getting at is where does the one person who could come in and be like, that person shouldn't be around this, or that person doesn't need to have their gun, or that, you know what I mean? Or that person doesn't need to be in this position, when maybe the commanding officer is like, no, they just need a minute to pause. Or like, when do you see what I'm saying? Like, how, or is it just, it's variable that, varies through.
It does vary. Ultimately the decision relies with the commanding officer of that unit. Is they can seek consultation and advice from you talk about security forces in the Air Force. They're the ones who maintain your armories and army rights. It'll be consultation within the medical professional should this person be seeking medical treatment for a mental health care or whatever issue. So it's a team of advisors that could be on there. They could be reaching out to legal to see if what legal advice is like. And that was often some of the things I would fill in the role I had as a first sergeant is, helping the commander set up legal counsel to be able to discuss what are the legal rights of this airman, what's the legal rights of this, depending on the situation that's there. So it can be highly complex depending on the situation at hand.
Yeah, I think about Isaac Ritchie. Like Isaac was, he's been a guest on this show a couple times. And Chris, if you've never like heard the Isaac Ritchie podcast, I think you'd find it fascinating because he got screwed over by New York State. So somehow his issue was the fact that he went to seek treatment and he got sucked into the New York Safe Act, which isn't so safe, like apparently, right? Like that's not what they care about. They kind of care about gun restriction and impeding on your rights. But the irony of Isaac's situation was that he went to his commanding officer. The commanding officer said, "Hey man, like let's get you the help you need." Had recommended him going to get help. Apparently he must have done it outside of the VA at some point. Took him back with open arms as soon as he was done and he was good, and Isaac joked around on the podcast that, after a few months or whatever, I'm back out there now shooting automatic weapons and grenade launchers and things like that. I'm okay with that. But as soon as he gets out and tries to buy a gun as a civilian, years later, realizes that his rights have been restricted and he's on, the no-go list, right, from the Knicks. And, I asked him on the show, I said, do you feel like your commanding officer screwed you over? And he said, no, I don't think he understood. You know what I mean? He had no resentment towards his commanding officer because he's like, he just wanted me to get the help. But he didn't understand by Isaac voluntarily checking himself into whatever hospital he did, that killed his gun rights for his future, not during his service, but just for his personal life. Yeah. So
Yeah, and there's got to be some balance with that. I experienced that once when I went for a background check, and I had some DMV thing that was hanging out here in Nevada, and it was like, oh, this flagged on your DMV record, and it wasn't anything serious. It wasn't, like a hit and run accident or anything like that, because like we pull from these records, and it was like, okay, like where's this coming up from, and like had to work through some nuances and craziness with that. Yeah, and so like I see that as there's people that are wanting to do the right things. There's people in leadership positions like of trust that like, yeah, hey, if this guy's good to go out there and fire some heavily tactical weapons, like, but can't own a personally owned firearm, like that's a disconnect in the system. Like if that should be able to be like that officer saying like going to the state and being like, hey, look, this is nonsense. This is a person of trust. It's like, so I can trust them with a very high powered weaponry, but this person can't buy a personally owned firearm. And you say case the same in the military, like, there's a lot of weaponry that we fire there that's not available on the public market. Like if we were to do that to the same, it'd be like, to me, that's a rights restriction there. It's like, okay, I'm going to trust this guy or gal to go downrange with a automatic weapon or grenade launcher or rockets or whatever, and all this other tactical gear that's there, but can't buy a handgun or shotgun when they get home. Like what's going on?
Yeah, it's goofy. It's just like what I brought up to the researchers in Seattle was, hey, if you're telling me that someone needs to have their firearms removed from their house and you take their firearms and you leave, I'm like, well, I don't know if that person should have access to their car. I don't know if that people, you know what I mean? Like that's really scary to me that you don't take the knives, the rope, the car. You know what I mean? That to me, if you're saying someone cannot have their firearms around them, you're saying that person is not stable, period. And if one death is too many, you know what I mean? You could definitely cause one death many different ways. You can cause death with these, your hands, your feet. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you could see, the researchers out there that say, well, they're not going to resort to other methods or anything like that. Then, but we always see other methods that are mentioned in these reports, like other things. Like if somebody is in that severe of crisis, like, um, there's got to be a way to be able to say like, hey, like this is the help that's needing if they're not going to find another method. Well, the human mind, I think, is designed in other ways. It's like if somebody is really intent on harming themselves, they're going to find a way. The firearm may be the most lethal and the most readily available, and I think that's what humans search for, maybe where they're in crisis. Is this going to cause the least amount of pain? Is it going to be lethal, and is it going to be that? And maybe that's the only rational piece in a human mind that's going through a suicidal crisis, is like, I don't want to be in pain when I die by suicide. I don't, and other things among that, family finding out, et cetera, like that. It's very nuanced, and I'm not quite sold on somebody's not going to seek other methods unless you've been in that position yourself and process that. Like I think it's very difficult at times to make a conclusion based upon that somebody in a suicidal crisis is not seeking alternative methods.
Yeah, I agree with that. I wonder how many people, this is just me thinking out loud, but I wonder how many people look at red flag laws who are pro red flag law. I wonder if they see it more as, some probably people would say both, but I wonder how many people think it's a great thing and would say, because we don't want that person going out and killing other people, or say, we want to stop someone. Like, you know what I mean? Like, does red flag trigger or ERPO trigger in your head protecting that person that's in the crisis, or is it about other people? It'd be an interesting question.
Man, that's one I got to be deep in thought on. It's we see it. We see a lot of the discussion that's out there.
Because my brain, if I think ERPO, like my biggest thing is, if I were to make some positive out of ERPO, but there aren't many, you know what I mean, would be, let's get that away from him so he doesn't hurt other family members or something like that. Because I feel like suicide is they're both equally important. I'm not trying to say one is less, but my brain says, when I think of ERPO, emergency orders, like you're getting in there, protective order, you're getting there to protect others.
I wonder.
That's just naturally.
I wonder how many ERPOs have been put in place and that person commits suicide by different means.
That would be a good study.
That's something to ask the researchers up there, maybe during the next conference. Yeah, I mean, I bet you there's some data that's coming out of it from the people that we know in the field. There's probably something brewing with that. We know there's people on both sides of the issue and they address it. They're saying that ERPOs work, and then we know there's a lot that are highly ineffective. And when it comes to like creating, again, if you go through this and it's used incorrectly or whatever, there's distrust in the system again. So then you've got somebody that may not ever seek care or go anything like that because it completely erodes trust. And perhaps there's in instances there's misuse of it, to where like the threshold is so low to be able to enact one in some of these places, like here, like this is where I like examining the legal process in each of the states that has these in place. Is like, where are the person's rights protected, on this, to be able to have like a hearing, to be able to, like, no kidding, protect the rights. And I guess I'm just not smart enough on, because there's so many nuances in every state on how these are triggered out there, that it's very, very tough to tell. And I believe in some they may be extended a little bit and used a little too frequently for some things, like we discussed before. It's if you're going to have these, like, but what are your friendly laws towards temporary storage with a trusted individual? So where's finding the balance in that? If you're going to enact something to where you remove them from that, what's the protections that are going to be in place for it to be able to turn it over to somebody that you trust, whether it be a family member or a peer? I think you can see this kind of play out in certain areas, like your tri-border states, like the very strict ERPO laws in Colorado versus, like, just across the street in Wyoming. So I know a lot of veterans go down the road because Fort Collins, Colorado is a place where they seek a lot of care, but they may actively live in Wyoming. And those two state laws differ vastly on ERPOs and firearms.
Yeah, to me, the only way I'm buying an ERPO prevented something is if the person who the ERPO was put on says, I was going to do that. You know what I mean? It confirms that. Like, that's the only way I think you count that. I don't like the judgment calls, because I've talked to people that have got, been flagged, and the three, not a lot, all said I shouldn't have been ERPO'd. They said something was wrong, but I shouldn't have had my rights taken away from me. There's nuance there.
There has to be, because it's the long-term effects that come finding. Like, they're out of this, they're out of the crisis, they're out of this. Like, they've found healing and a path forward. They've got a new life. They got sober. They did this. They've mended a relationship with a family to where, like, they've become responsible. Like, what are the long-term effects of these being in place? And I guess that's the question we have to keep answering. Is like, this is a person, somebody who had it enacted on there. Like, do you sentence them to life because of a temporary crisis that they may have been through? And to me, that's not fair to anybody.
Yeah, definitely. Ghost, thank you, Ghost, today, by the way, for being the fourth member of the podcast today in the chat. You're bringing up some great points, but he said with his experience in the Marines, we tried not to let anything out of the platoon command. If something got past the platoon level, it was a problem. And your thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. Then if it leaks or it gets out, then the trust in that command is no longer there. It's like, you want to solve problems at the lowest level. If it's getting anything higher than that, like too many hands get into that cookie jar, and then too many people find out too quickly. So it's like, you want to care for your own at the tactical level that you can be at. We trust our enlisted and we trust our junior officers just to lead at those low levels. It's like, you've got 20-year-olds going out there in combat being responsible for 100 people. Like, you've got to build, again, it comes down to leading men and women. And so leadership, the buck stops at the lowest level possible. And if you need some higher level decisions based upon experience or anything like that, then maybe you consult with your next hire, or some situations just could get out of hand to where you have no choice to have it involved. But the trust and leadership has to be at the lowest level possible.
All right, so we're coming to the end here, and I'm going to ask you an impossible question, Chris, but it's always fun to do that. Like I said, I know when I see you at a show, whether it's MCon or anywhere else, that I can go and talk to you about these things, and you completely get it. And it's like you get it on that first shot. So if I'm bitching about something, and you're like, you're absolutely right, and you tell me exactly what I was about to say anyway. So, as someone who's been in these circles, who's dedicated the rest of their life to this, because I don't think you're ever leaving this space. What would you like to see? What would you like to see from the military? If you had a magic wand, what would you like to see?
Oh, if I had a magic wand, I'd like to see us continue to take care of one another. Hey, it's not scary to seek help and seek care. Let's Military members are not victims. We're out there. We're more successful than anything. And I don't take that stereotype of the broken veteran and keep living it. There are so many of us that are out there that are doing great work. When you leave, you're gonna miss your buddies. Rely on those buddies here and now, because they're the ones who went through the experience with you. Whether it's that woman, that man to your right, that's the most important thing that you're gonna have, is those experiences. It may have never been about the mission. It may never have been about the unit you were assigned to, but the relationships you build on there, continue to cultivate those relationships. Last but not least, this is an open call to all those veteran service organizations that are out there that deal in suicide prevention. Have the conversations about responsible firearms ownerships within your organizations. There's a few that are doing it out there. But if you want to get after veteran suicide, these are conversations you need to have, and these are resources that you need to fund if you are responsible for saving veterans' lives and their caregivers and their families as well too.
Chris, going off that, what's one thing with your magic wand that you would have maybe the military do itself to set up an individual, maybe whatever, 18, enlisting today, to when they got out at the end of their military career to be in a better place than veterans today?
Whew.
Yeah, the upstream.
Just take care of one another. You go back to the old Bill and Ted's universe. Is just be excellent to one another. Be good human beings. I think we could resource some better storage solutions or firearm solutions within installations on there that could take place. Is that I think to have that conversation is, if you're going to fund some things, like be able to provide safe resources to where personally owned firearms and everything can be responsibly stored or turned over to your fellow veterans in a better manner than just perhaps using the base armory. Like, let's create other solutions. So let's fund other solutions that are out there. If we're entrusting them with duty weapons, let's provide a solution for personally owned firearms as well too.
Yeah, no, I did say, to me, it sounds like, I think if just bringing this up and having these conversations or talking about in mental health, like it's no big deal, almost like it's popular, right? Like you, I'm sure, like the way you talk about cycling, you're becoming an avid cyclist, right? It's just like having that, to be able to talk about that right from the jump, about mental health, and not make it like an icky, show weakness if I talk about its subject, I think could definitely help if it's kind of implemented in the beginning. That's why Walk Talk America does what it does. Like, we want you to open the box of the gun, which is a great day, while you have that joy of getting a new firearm, and also be like, oh yeah, that's right, mental health, I got to think about that. It's like you're planting seeds. People always ask me, they're like, oh, the card in the box, you think this saves lives? I'm like, I don't do it just because I don't want to catch people in crisis. I want there to be omnipresence with mental health, like where it's just always there in the background, right? Where you're always thinking about it, or at least you're seeing it. And I think the messenger needs to be the firearms industry, whether that's the manufacturer, the instructor, or the gun shop. I think that for far too long, we've let, obviously I'm jumping up on a soapbox here, but we've let these anti-gun organizations, or organizations that think they're pro-gun but have a lot of anti-gun stances, carry these messages to the point where you think that they're the only ones that are saying that. You know what I mean? It's the Brady's, it's the Everytowns. There are times when I've said this before, when Brady is talking, like JJ from Brady is talking, and she sounds just like me when it comes to firearms, right? But it's the but where we have difference of opinions. That doesn't make her a bad person, but people need to hear it from guys like me who are like, restriction is the last option that my brain goes to. Let's find all these other things, like you said. Creating different avenues and spaces for people to turn things over voluntarily, knowing that they can get them back whenever they want. Because if someone says to me, yo, I just need 3 days to breathe, man, and then I'll be over this. Like, I know me, I know myself, but they need to feel comfortable being able to tell me they need 3 days to breathe, because sometimes the plan isn't somebody else's plan. Sometimes the plan's already up here. You just need to be able to execute it without judgment. So that's the soapbox I'm jumping off.
Yeah, but and for sure, and you brought up my passion. I love cycling, and a lot of people get cycling wrong. They think it's an individual sport, but it's a total team sport. So there's this concept in cycling called the draft, and like you have to rely on that. If you get tired, you want to get behind somebody in the draft, and they're going to pull you along for a time frame. And so that's where there's a marrying between firearm safety and cycling. It's like, if I need a little bit of a pause, if I need to let my legs go, if I'm tired, if I'm there, like, I need somebody to step up and to be able to lead me out, or to pull for a little bit, whether it be 3 minutes, whether it be like this. It's like, I'm relying on that other person that I trust to carry me forward to a better place that I can be at. So and the analogy we say in cycling all the time, we go further and faster together as a team. And that's what it takes collectively in suicide prevention. We're going to go further, faster as a team, and having this open dialogue to be able to care for one another.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's awesome. Well, Chris, I want to thank you for coming on. You know that you always can come on anytime you want. You got something to talk about, or we want to dissect an article or vent. This is your home. Always an open invitation. Kevin, do you have anything to add? You good?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Well, Chris, is there anything you want else to talk about, like that you got going on, or
This is what I got going on right now. So
right, this is our lives.
Yeah.
This is what we do. No, so I look forward to working with you in the future. Like I said, thank you for coming on. I want to thank all the sponsors. I want to thank all the listeners. Like and subscribe to this if this helped you. Ghost, thank you for today. You, G Webs, you guys always come with it. You bring something to the show. I always love that. Looking at the comment section. Arms Corps, Ruger, all of our sponsors that we love near and dear, that make this all possible to keep these lights on, that have actually allowed me to have a dream job. I created this position not knowing if I could ever get paid from it, and do this all the time, and here we are. And it's because of the firearms industry. It's because of these gun companies that see the value in this. So I want to thank all of our sponsors. And until next time, we wish you better mental health.